Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, classmates. So, our topic is all about property planning and the market. So, I'm going to discuss property. So, property is in fact a social institution and so is defined by custom, convention, and in most cases by law. So, property is more than just an object or position. It is defined by custom, convention, and in most cases by law. So, um, these rules define what property is and who owns it. So, for example, is kaning private law, kaning property law. So, property law dictates how resources or um, assets can be sold or inherited. Next is to describe something as property is to acknowledge that a relationship of ownership exists between the object in question and the person or group to whom it belongs. So, describing something as property is recognizes the relationship or the connection between sa kaning object o kaning sa owner ani. And this relationship implies control, use, and responsibilities. So pag mag-own gani ta og kaning property, na dyan na siya, includes dyan na ang kaning liabilities and duties. So for example, it is kaning nagtag-iya ka og kaning sakyanan. So it means nga nakay katungod nga unsaon ni paggamit or imong ibaligya. And it includes nga kaning responsable ka sa for maintenance sa imong sakyanan o kaning sa legal obligations like registration. So next is property is thus an established and enforceable claim to an object or position. It is a right, not a thing. So this means that that ownership are protected or recognized by legal systems, so making them enforceable against others. So for example is nakay yuta, so nakay rights to exclude others from using it without your permission, and this right can be defended in the court if it is violated. So there are different forms of property, which is private property, common property, and state property. So first, private property. So private property is a distinctive form of property defined by C.B. Macpherson in 1973 as the right of an individual or institution to exclude others from the use or benefit of something. So this means that the owner have a control over that property, and ensuring that only the owner can decide unsaon ni paggamit or kinsa lang ang maka-access ani nga property. So for example, if nakay balay, so you have the right to decide kung kinsa ra ang kaning makasulod sa imong balay. So next is John Locke. So Locke argued each person has exclusive rights over his or herself. It follows that they have an exclusive right to the product of their own labor, that is, what they personally have crafted, produced, or created. So, um, John Locke argued that each person has exclusive rights over their own body and actions. So, they have exclusive rights to what they created or produce through their labor. So for example is nagama ka og tree house. So from raw materials and using your skills and effort. So you have the exclusive right ana nga tree house because it is the product of your labor. Next is property rights are therefore based upon the idea that inanimate objects have been mixed with human labor and so become the exclusive property of the labor. So by transforming by transforming object through their labor, they create something new and they gain ownership of the resulting product. So and it is a way of recognizing sa kaning effort sa isa ka tawo and rewarding aning ilang effort that went into something valuable. So for example is ang farmer which nag-cultivate and og nag-harvest og crops. So on a piece of land, and so the farmer gain ownership of that crops because they have invested their labor on that land, and it's produced. So next is Robert Nozick. According to Nozick, private providing property has been acquired or transferred justly, there is no justification for infringing property rights, whether in the cause of social justice or in the interests of the larger society. So he believed that kaning as long as property is transferred or acquired justly, it should not be taken away and interfered with property rights. So like interfering with property rights would undermine the principle of kaning koan principle of fairness and individual liberty. So nakay rights jud sa imong property. And for example, if kaning ni palit ka og yuta, so nakay katungod ana samot na og kaning imo ning gi palit in a good way or legally. So it shouldn't been redistributed for bisan pa og kaning makatabang ni siya to reduce inequality. Kay imo man ni it is legally, you legally acquired it. And next is Friedrich Hayek in The Road to Serfdom. Hayek portrayed property ownership as the most fundamental of civil liberties and argued that personal freedom can reign only within a capitalist economic system. So he argued that owning property is fundamental freedom and essential for civil liberties. And he believed that capitalist system is best suited to protect property rights and personal freedom. So example is kaning nagtaiya kag balay. So it gives you a sense of independence and freedom. So next, private property sees property not as an economic resource or as consumable wealth, but rather as a source of personal fulfillment. So private property isn't just about economic gain, but as something that provides personal satisfaction and kuan kaning fulfillment. So having a property gives you a personal security, and it is reflects to individual's identity and serve as an extension of oneself. So next is Proudhon's famous dictum, property is a thief. What Proudhon meant by this was not so much that individuals have no right to property, but simply that the accumulation of wealth in private hands can allow the rich to exploit and oppress the poor. So Proudhon believes that that when wealth is accumulate to private hands, it allows the rich to exploit or oppress the poor. So for example is landlord sa kaning magbantay sa boarding house. So landlord owning multiple properties and may exploit tenants by charging them with kaning high nga taas nga mga renta nga, which leads that kaning it's hard para sa mga nagrent adto is lisod sila para mo afford sa basic needs, because sa renta pa lang daan is kaning mahal na ilang kuan, dako na ilang magasto. So next is Marx saw a stark distinction between those who own wealth, the bourgeois, and those whose labor is responsible for its creation, the proletariat. In a Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels were therefore aimed to sum up the theory of communism in a single phrase: abolition of private property. So this aimed to eliminate private ownership of things like factories, kaning mga lain-lain nga butang, so kaning sa or kaning yuta and other resources. So it aims to create a society where kaning wealth is distributed fairly jud siya and based sa needs sa mga tao, dili sa wants, and it eliminates inequalities of capitalists. So the second form of property is common property. A right of access to property is shared by all members of a collective body, and no member is entitled to detach a, a portion from the commonwealth and exclude others, thereby establishing private domain over it. So kaning sa common property is ang access to property is shared among members or group, and no one can claim a private part of it. And so kaning for example is kaning namoy common nga garden. So kaning nakay karapatan nga mogamit sa katong nga space because katong or kaning mag-harvest atong nga garden because it is common man siya, or magtanom ka dito sa kaning inyong common nga garden. And next is common ownership may be universal in the sense that no human being is or can be excluded from use, as has sometimes been advocated in the case of land. So again, common ownership means nga kaning everyone can use it and no one is excluded, and it promotes fairness and equal opportunities for all the people. So for example is kaning na public parking lot, so nakay anyone can use it and available ni siya para sa tanan, so nakay katungod nga mo parking ana. And also kaning common ownership is na-promote ni siya og kaning social harmony and kaning a sense of collective identity, and kaning it helps to reduce selfishness, greed, and competition. So next, Plato, for instance, believed common ownership to be essential because it would ensure that the class of rulers would act as a united and selfless. So Plato believes that common ownership was essential for the ruling class to act unitedly and selflessly. So by sharing property, the rulers would avoid personal interest and work together for the common good. So next, critics allege that in robbing the individual of a private domain of personal possessions, common ownership creates a depersonalized and insecure social environment. So critics argue that by taking away private property, common ownership makes people insecure and feel less unique. So without personal possession, kaya wala sila kaning property nga panag-ihan jud. So ma-insecure jud sila sa uban samot nang uban kay na mga dagko jud nga property. So next is a final problem with collective property is that it embodies no mechanism for restricting access to scarce resources except a reliance upon natural good sense and cooperation. This is sometimes explained by reference to what they call tragedy of the commons. So tragedy of the commons, it means that, or it is a situation where common property or common ownership is kaning na overuse and kaning nahurot na ang ubang resources kay wala may kaning mechanism para ilimit ang access sa mga tao ani. So for example is kaning overfishing, so which can lead to a depletion of fish stocks since there is no, or kaning walay tag-iyaan na nga water or ibutang nato kaning suba. So ang kaning tanang kaning fishermen would kaning try to catch some fish as they can kay wala may nag-prohibit nila para mangisda. So next is the last form of property is state property. So nationalization similarly implies ownership by the nation but through a system of state control. So nationalization means that the nation owns the property and it is managed by the government. So unlike sa private corporation that act for profit, profit, the state act or manage property supposedly for the good of all citizens. And next is ordinary citizens, for instance, have no more right of access to state property. So ang kaning mga ordinary citizens is wala sila direct access sa state property as they would with common property or private property. So for example is kaning police car. So ang makagamit ani is kana ara mga police. Ang ordinary citizens is dili sila pwede to use it. So like sa ilang gibuhat sa kaning kuan nga other private vehicle nga makagamit sila. And next is in particular, the state can act as a mechanism through which access to and the use of scarce resources is controlled, thereby avoiding the tragedy of commons. In the case of state property, however, the right of access to economic resources is limited not for private gain but in the long-term interest of the community. So, ang kaning state is nag-manage siya sa kuan iyang gi-manage ang scarce resources to prevent overuse and depletion, thereby avoiding the tragedy of commons where shared resources are of overuse. And next is state property is, however, subject to severe criticism. Advocates of common ownership normally point out that state property is neither public nor social in any meaningless sense. So, kaning kuan ang critics nag-argued nga ang state property is isn't truly public or social. They believe that that even though the state manages or control the property, it doesn't necessarily means nga ang kaning mga tao or kaning mga citizens is naka-benefits equally or has a say in its use. And next, in addition, state property has often been linked to centralization, bureaucracy, and inefficiency. So state property is associated with centralizations where ang kaning mga decisions are made by few rather than collectively. And it leads to bureaucracy and inefficiency because it kaning ang state may not always manage the resources effectively as private sectors or other community group might. So morning ang sometimes ang kaning mga private or government services are being privatized kay ang kaning mga private sector is makakuan man sila makamanage sila more efficiently and produce or provide better services kaysa sa mga kaning sa state because ang kaning state is daghan naman siyang mga responsibility mo nang sometimes dili sila makamanage og ayo ani nga kaning nga matter. That's all. Thank you.
Good morning, Mom. My topic is entitled planning. So, what is planning? Planning is very crucial in our lives. Planning is very helpful. Every circumstances and obstacles in our lives, plans will resolve it. So now, we will proceed about planning. So what is planning? A planning need for some kind of economic organizations arises out of the simple fact of scarcity. While human needs and wants are infinite, the material resources available to satisfy them clearly are not. In a world of today is abundant. Wealth and general prosperity economics would be irrelevant. But in circumstances of scarcity, economic issues threaten to dominate all others, political ones included, as already noted, that the heart of the economy. So, planning is very important and very significantly because it helps us. Although we have different wants and needs in our lives, our wants and needs is infinite. It meant to say, walang katapusan. So now, planning is very helpful in our daily lives. So question has traditionally been posed as a choice between two fundamentally different economic systems, socialism and capitalism, and therefore between two revival mechanisms for allocating resources with a plan or the marketing the economy. The plan or the market. The idea of planning is often poorly understood, being linked in many people's minds to the machinery of central plannings once found in the Soviet Union. So, poor people is begins in poor class where individuals must be to recover in that particular situations in a terms of planning. So people who are self-interested or using the self-interested according to Adam Smith, the invisible hands, that we have a free market that it also related in a planning because planning is a self-interested. Planning is a common word where people must be used this in order to recover in that particular circumstances. So let's proceed to the other slides. So um, planning has assumed a wide variety of forms, having been employed by developing countries in the third world as well as by some advanced industrialized states. Moreover, although some have argued that historical developments have entirely discredited the planning process, it is difficult to see how economic activity can undertaken without some element of planning. So planning is a wide forms of being employed in developing countries. So, for example, a capitalist businessman does their planning to make more their business stable and more profits they gain in every month. So that is a planning. Planning is used in every situations. So the planning process to plan is to draw up. Why? So planning, don't don't use your words is just to recall about the word planning. But if you have a plan, you need to have an actions. So uh in that is refer here that to plan is to draw up or devise a method for achieving a special goal. So in effect, it is to think before one acts. To think first before click that kind of job or informations. So ineffective that all forms of planning must therefore have two essential features. In the first place, planning is purposeful activity. So planning is a presupposes the existence of clear and definable objectives, something that is desirable or achieved or group accomplished. So purposeful activity. For example, if you're going to build your house, if you're going to think first to build houses, so you need to have your goal or purpose of your activity. What coming next for tomorrow? That is a purposeful activity, it means to say. So let's proceed to the other side. These goals may be highly specific as the in case of the output targets sets in Soviet style central planning, or they have made broader and more generalized. For example, an increase in economic growth, a reduction in unemployment, and so on. So, increase in economic growth. Of course, a, you must provide as a governor or as a health worker, you need to provide a perceptions or contraceptions to avoid an economic growth because economic growth can effectively distract because of overpopulations that is in economic growth. So you need to plan, you need to test it before act. A reduction in unemployment in our country, that there is many people without jobs. There is many people are remaining in unemployment because the leader in the higher positions, didn't think what is the coming next for the day and day every single day of life, because unemployment, especially for example the 4 Ps is a unemployment that a person must be included in that kind of program. So second, planning. Planning is a rational activity. It is based upon the assumption of economic and social problems are capable of being solved through the exercise of human reason and ingenuity. So what do you mean by the rational activity? You need to think first. You need to must test the what's is the meaning of jobs that requiring, especially in the societies, in the communities, or in the states, within the states. So rational activity is applied for planning. Planning is between the two are intercorrelated. And when you think first, for example, is you're going to make your task or you're going to make your platform in the community, so you need to bring and brought your rationality, rational interest, or rational choice. So that is a rational activity. So let's proceed. At the heart of economic planning, therefore, lies a belief that the problem of scarcity can be overcome by a rational mechanism for allocating resources. Scarcity can be best be overcome by rational mechanism for allocating resources geared established or human goals. These rational mechanisms is undoubtedly involve the exercise of some kind of control over economic life, the production, the distribution, and the exchange of goods and services. The idea of planning has traditionally been associated with socialist economics and particularly with Marxism. So when we say Marxism and Marxian approach, that the capitalist is the prioritized and there's no equal rights, because between the poor and the um, core countries and the periphery countries is have no uh, have no freedom, have no choice. They have no equal rights because in Marxism terms that never laid down a blueprint for the organization of a future socialist society, and believing that it's impossible to envisage in detail how historically different society would work, he restricted himself of a number of broad principles. So his central belief, Marxian central belief, is about the was private property should be abolished and replaced by a system of collective or social ownership. So in a Marx view that capitalism was a system of commodity production in which goods and services were produced in response to market pressures, a system of production for exchange. So socialist economy would be based upon the principle of productions for use and would dispense altogether with market transactions and indeed the need for more money economy. In other words, that planning is under socialism. The economy would serve the material needs of society, a requirement that presupposes some kind of planning arrangement. So that it is according to Marx, the view that capitalism is a commodity productions. Then, unfortunately, Marx did not specify what form that arrangement would take. What is certain, however, is that neither Marx nor Engels envisage that emphasis upon central control and large scale, that productions planning would characterize the planning process in a Soviet Union. So, promise of planning. What is the term of planning? So, plan is, promise of planning is the attraction of planning, rests upon economic, political, and moral considerations. Central to this argument is the fact that planning is a rational process, implying that no economic problem is beyond rational human ingenuity to solve. So, in short, that planning places the economy firmly in human hands rather than leaving it to the impersonal and sometimes capricious realms of the market. So, premise of planning. Um, premise of planning is you are going to conduct your experiment. You're going to experiment to build a house, to build like covered court or house or building. So you need to bring or use your common sense to fill up that kind of particular situations. So premise of planning is you're going to conduct with heart, not always words or not talked only, but to just doing with prosperity and strong. Because many people waiting for you to what comings for another next day. So promise of planning is you're going to conduct it truly and you're going to build it very exact time. For example, you need to build a house. So you need to um, finish it in 1 year, or not rather 1 year, but in 4 months or 5 months. So that is a promise of planning. So this is particularly important in establishing overall economic goals, what to produce and how much to produce. Planners are able to organize a system of productions for use geared to the satisfaction human needs instead of a systems of productions for a change that responds only to market forces. So let's proceed. Although human needs are highly complex and infinitely, when we say infinitely, that is unlimited. Variable, especially in the areas of consumer, taste and population, fashion, there is a broad agreement about what constitutes the basic necessities of life. This surely that shelter, a subsistence diet, primary health care, and basic education. Unlike capitalist countries, state socialist regimes oriented their economies around the satisfaction of such needs. Planning can therefore foster social solidarity and strengthen the bonds of community. In contrast to capitalism, which encourages only self-striving and avarice. So, premise of planning is included there, the solidarity, broad agreement. And for example, every month is you're going to visit the doctor. Every month if you're going to visit your doctor for your health. So another example also is the government build a health center where it is a foundation of everyone's and individual for the safety of their health. So there is, moreover, a clear link between planning and egalitarianism, which helps to explain why planning has been so attractive to socialists. So, planning goes hand in hand with the collective ownerships of wealth, ensuring that a planned economy is not debilitated by class conflict, which pits the interests of property owners and against those of the masses. A planned economy is also likely to be characterized by a more egalitarian system of distribution as a material rewards start to reflect social needs rather than individual productivity. So, perils of planning. So, not all planning are good towards the path. Not all plannings are better, but sometimes planning is in danger. Not all time that you need to bring your capacity to plan is you are expected to have a production or effective, but sometimes we can commit a failure. So that we called a perils of planning. So of planning. Perils of planning is despite its attraction planning undoubtedly has a number of serious drawbacks. So indeed, planning has never stood alone as a principle of economic organizations but has always been sustained by market imperialities. So this is imperfectly obvious in the capitalist West, where planning has sought to sustain market capitalism by compensating for its failures rather than trying to replace it. So sometimes also that perils of planning is can make in danger for the owner of this business or kind of capitalist. So not all planning are where if expected is perfectly, but sometimes we have committed a lot of circumstances. So according to Friedrich Hayek in The Root of Amsterdam, one of the first attempts to develop a critique of planning, there is no doubt that the sluggish performance of centrally planned economies, particularly in contrast to an increasingly affluent West, was a major factor contributing to the collapse of communism and the revolution's height suggested also that planning was inherently inefficient because planners were confronted by a range and complexity of information that was simply beyond their capacity to handle central planning. So it meant to say that making output decision about what each and every enterprise is to produce and therefore also inputs decisions which allocate resources to them. So my insights or my understanding about my title or topic that I will discuss today is planning is a fundamental aspect of success in our various domains, from personal life to business ventures. It involves a structured approach to defining goals, outlining strategies, and allocating resources to achieve desired outcomes. So these explorations is delves into key insights about planning, drawing upon diverse perspectives from various sources. So that's why planning is very crucial in our lives. When we going to plant, it is expectedly that we are enhanced, but not all plannings are were expected. It is good for us, but sometimes we have commit a failure a lot of circumstances in our life. But we need, but remember, we need to be strong always. Think like a proton, always positive. And that will be all. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Reporting John Ray Lewis, Bachelor of Political Science, Block A, at Jermisio de Polo Campus. Thank you so much.
So good evening everyone. So tonight I'm going to report about the market. So what is market? A market, as everyone knows, is a place where goods are bought or sold, such as a fish market or a meat market. So ang market kuno is isa ka lugar kung asa nato mapalit o mabaligya ang mga produkto pareha ng isda, karne, gulay o uban pa. In economic theory, however, the term market refers not so much to a geographical location as to the commercial activity which takes place therein. So ang market kay dili lamang nagtugon sa usa ka pisikal nga lugar kung asa mapalit o mabaligya ang mga produkto kundi nagtugon sad sa malawak na konsepto sa pangangalakal. So labaw pa sad ni siya sa interaction sa mga na maligya o na malit. So nagpalitan na gyud sila og kalakal og serbisyo. In that sense, a market is a system of commercial exchange in which the buyers is wishing to acquire a good service are brought into contact with sellers offering the same for purchase. Although transaction can obviously take the form of barter, a system of good for good exchange, commercial activity more usually involves the use of money, serving as a convenient means for exchange. So this means that a market is a system where people who want to buy something can connect with people who wants to sell something. So mura ra sila ga barter. Pero karon ang inig mo palit ka, syempre ang ato ibayad is kwarta. The market has usually been regarded as the central feature of capitalist economy. The market is therefore the organizational principle which operates within the capitalism, allocating resources, determining what is produced, setting the price and the wage levels, and so forth. The market is the primary mechanism that drives economic activity. So it's the system that decides what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. The market achieves this through the interaction of supply and demand. So kung mataas ang demand para sa isa ka produkto, sinasay possibility nga motaas ang presyo sa isa ka produkto. If mubaba naman sad ang demand sa isa ka produkto, nasay possibility nga mubaba sad ang presyo. The market mechanism. An earliest attempt to analyze of workings of the market was undertaken by Scottish economist Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations 1973 to 1930. So Adam Smith is a Scottish economist, was the first person who studied on how market work. He wrote the book Wealth of Nations and published between 1976 and 1930, where he explains his side on how the market works. Smith attacked constraints upon economic activity such as the survival of the feudal guilds and the mercantilist restrictions of trade, arguing that as far as possible, the economy should function as self-regulating market. So Smith criticized systems like feudalism and mercantilism, which restricted economic activity. Smith also believed that the economy should be allowed to function freely without government interference. He also argued that a self-regulating market driven by individual self-interest should lead to economic prosperity. He believed that the market competition would act as an invisible hand, helping as if by magic to organize economic life without the need for external control. So the invisible hand is a metaphor used by Adam Smith to describe how a free market economy can self-regulate without government interventions. It suggests that when individuals pursue their own self-interest is a competitive market, it unintentionally benefits society as a whole. He believed that Smith suggests that wealth is created through a process of market competition. In such criticism, circumstances, the economy will be regulated by the price mechanism, responding as it does to market forces, usually referred to as the forces of demand and supply. Smith believed that wealth is created when businesses compete with each other. These competitions uh, drives into innovation, efficiency, and inner prices for consumer. For example, para ito akong example ganina, kung mataas ang demand para sa isa ka produkto, mataas sad ang presyo. If mo decrease ang demand sa mabagsak sad ang presyo. Demand is the willingness and the ability to buy a particular good and service at a particular price. Supply refers to the quantity of a good or service that will be available for purchase at a particular price. So, ang demand kay nag-base sa kagustuhan o kakayahan sa usa ka consumer na palito ng isa ka produkto o serbisyo. While ang supply naman kay nag-base sa kadaghanon sa produkto o serbisyo nga andam na kaya sa mga producer na ibaligya sa tiyak na presyo. A market economy is nothing without a vast network of commercial relationships in which both consumers and producers are indicate their wishes through the price of mechanism. So, ang market economy nagpasabot sa ekonomiya na ang produksyon o distribution sa mga produkto o serbisyo nga gabi sa supply o demand. Ang price mechanism naman mao ang sistema nga magdesisyon sa presyo wherein ang mga consumer o producer ang mga mustudyo sa ilang mga paliton nga produkto. So, miracle of the market. The principal attraction of the market has been a mechanism for creating wealth. The market is a gently and highly sophisticated communication system constantly sending messages or signals from consumers to producers, producers to consumer, and so on. So, ang market is a powerful mechanism for wealth creation, and the price mechanism acts as a communication system that helps both consumers and producers make decisions. So, nagpasabot nga ang merkado ay nigama bilang isa ka sistema sa komunikasyon sa pinaagi sa mga presyo o pinaagi sa mga consumer o producer. The price mechanism in effect acts as the central nervous system of the economy, transmitting signals in terms of fluctuating prices. For example, a rise in the price of saucepans conveys a consumer the message. Buy fewer saucepans while producers receive the message produce more saucepan. As a result, a market economy can constantly adapt to changes in the commercial behavior and in economic circumstances. So this means that a market economy is highly adaptable and can adjust to changes in consumer behavior and economic conditions. New and expanding industries will, for instance, win out against old and inefficient ones, as healthy profit levels attract the capital investment and labor is drawn by the prospect of wages. However, capitalist enterprises operate in a market environment which rewards the efficient and punishes the inefficient. Market disciplines therefore help to eradicate the waste, overmoney, and low productivity, which by contrast can be tolerated with a planning system. So ang pagpasabot kaya ang mga bagong industriya nga nagtagumpay kaysa nagtagumpay kaysa sa mga daan nga mga asensadong mga industry kay However, capitalist enterprise operates in the market environment which rewards the efficient and punishes in the efficient. So, ang pasabot ani kay ang mga pwersa sa pamilihan parehaan ng kompetisyon o demand sa mga consumer kay nakatabang para mawala ang mga dili na kay maayo sa ekonomiya. Market disciplines therefore help to eradicate the waste, overmanning, and low productivity, which by contrast can be tolerated within a planning system. So, a planned economy where the government control the allocation of resources may not have the same incentives to eliminate waste, reduce overstuffing, and increase productivity. So that's all. Thank you.
Good day everyone, I am Charlene Siandoy and I am tasked to report the libertarianism and the market failure. So first, let's discuss what is libertarianism. So libertarianism, it is a philosophy of individual freedom and limited government. So libertarianism also refers to a political and philosophical ideology that advocates for individual liberty, limited government intervention, and free market principles. So, libertarianism seeks to maximize individual freedom and autonomy while minimizing the role of the state. So, we also have the anti-statism. It presents compelling critiques to the legitimacy and authority of the state. So, we have two based on libertarian tradition. So, first is the idea of individual rights, and the second is the laissez-faire economic doctrines. So the idea of individual rights, it is right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, right to privacy, and equal protection. While the laissez-faire economic doctrines, it is emphasizing individual freedom and market self-regulation. So libertarianism, a political and economic philosophy emphasizing individual freedom, unlimited government, and free markets. So the contribution of influential thinkers including Adam Smith, William Godwin, Max Turner, Friedrich Hayek, Robert Nozick, and Mary Rothbard. It is highlighting their ideas on individualism, anarchism, and laissez-faire capitalism. So Adam Smith and the foundations of free market economics. So Adam Smith's seminal work, The Wealth of Nations, in 1776. It laid the groundwork for modern free market theories. Smith argued that individual self-interest drives economic growth and efficiency. So his famous stating is, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we accept our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. And Smith, 1776, his concept on the invisible hand described how market forces naturally allocate resources, promoting economic prosperity. And the second is William Godwin, an anarchist thought. So William Godwin's An Inquiry Concerning Political Justice in 1793 so presented a comprehensive critique of authoritarianism, advocating for individual autonomy and the abolition of government. So Godwin's anarchist ideas influenced subsequent thinkers, shaping the libertarian movement. So the third is Mark Stirner's egoism. So Mark Stirner's The Ego on Its Own in 1845. So introduced extreme individualism, prioritizing personal interest above. So Stirner's philosophy emphasized the individual sovereignty, rejecting external authority. So the fourth one is Friedrich Hayek and modern free market theory. Friedrich Hayek works particularly The Road to Serfdom in 1944, solidified his position as leading free market theorist. Hayek argued that government intervention leads to totalitarianism, while markets promote efficiency, innovation, and individual freedom. The fifth is Robert Nozick's rights-based libertarianism. So Robert Nozick's Anarchy, State, and Utopia in 1974 presented a rights-based theory of justice, rejecting welfare and redistribution policies. Nazis advocate for minimal government, protecting individual rights and property, and discriminating victimless crimes. The sixth is the Murray-Rothbard and anarcho-capitalism. So, Murray-Rothbard for a New Liberty in 1973 integrated laissez-faire capitalism with anarchist principles, rejecting the state as a protection racket. Rothbard's philosophy emphasized voluntary associations, private property, and individual autonomy. Move to the market failure. So the market failure, it is occurs when the free market fails to allocate goods and services efficiently, so resulting in economic welfare losses. This phenomenon arises from various factors, including market imperfections, externalities, and public goods. So the market failure, it also refers to the situations where the market mechanism fails to allocate resources optimally, leading to efficiencies, economic welfare losses. This can occur due to information asymmetry, externalities, or the presence of public goods. The public goods at market failure. Public goods are non-rivalrous and non-excludable, meaning their consumption does not diminish their availability, and it's impossible to exclude individuals from benefiting. So the market fails to provide public goods because first is the non-excludability. Refers to the firms cannot include the non-payers from consuming public goods, and the second is non-rivalry. So it is the public goods are not scarce, reducing incentives for private provision. And the third is the free rider problem, which is individuals may not contribute to public goods, expecting others to bear the cost. And that's all.